Hello and welcome back to Breeze Gaming. Today we have a quick tutorial for you looking at how to draw rectangles inside of Pygame. What I have set up here is just a page inside of Jupyter Notebook, and I just have some basic architecture set up for building a screen inside of Pygame. So nothing else set up just outside of building a basic screen and starting a basic game loop. And so I'm going to be breaking down exactly how we can draw rectangles on top of a screen. So before we get started with the rectangle aspect, we're going to look at some of this architecture here to see exactly what we're working around. So first, we have an import and initialize cell up here for importing Pygame and SYS or system, and then also initializing Pygame as well. So I'm going to go ahead and enter that. And then all this is just a time module right here. And I set this up for just practice purposes. This is not required to draw the screen or the rectangles. This is just up here for practice sake. And down here I have a couple of lines here for setting the FPS. So clock.tick just sets the FPS of the game, even though there's not really any other game elements. It's just for practice purposes, and it's not relevant to the tutorial. So now this next one is important. This is the display module that sets up the actual screen we'll be working on. So right here we have the screen variable with pygame.display.setMode, which is setting the size, and then 1000. This is important right here because this determines the extent to which we can draw our rectangles. So we don't want to be drawing any rectangles greater than 1000. Of course, depending on your monitor size and depending on what size you prefer, you can draw this screen size to whatever you would like. But for my monitor, I'm going to do 1000. So then we have pygame.display.setCaption, which is just setting a title for the screen. And then we have screen color, which is a variable I created to set the color of the screen, which I've just set it to white. And then the next module is the shape module, and this is where I'll be drawing the rectangle shape, and then I'll be implementing it down here in the game loop. So this is just, creating the shape inside of the code, and then, and I think I said drawing, I'm not drawing any rectangle in here, I'm just creating the rectangle, and then I'm drawing it inside of the game loop down here. So after I do create the rectangle, I'm going to go down to the game loop, and which is just essentially a while loop that's going to continuously run as long as I have the screen pulled up. So this section right here is just a basic for event in pygame.event.get. This is essentially grabbing all of the events that I have created inside of my game loop, and then this I've specified further. If event.type equals pygame.quit, it's asking, are there any quit events? And then if there are any quit events that are activated, then pygame quits and system.quit, and then the system exits, but I don't have any quit events, so this isn't relevant. Once again, this is just for practice sake for the game loop. What's more important is down here we have coloring of the screen, which is screen.fill, which is screen color, which is the variable I created up here, which is going to be white. If you don't want to create the variable, you don't have to. You can just literally put white in here and it'll do the same exact thing. But I'm just going to go ahead and put my variable that I created in here and just do screen.color, screen_color. And then next we have drawing shapes. Now, before we draw the rectangle, it's important to note that the order in which you draw objects onto the screen is very important, and you need to keep in mind how you're drawing objects onto the screen. It's essentially similar to building a sandwich on top of a plate. Your plate is your screen, and you want to make sure you build your sandwich in the correct order on top of the plate. So in our instance, we have screen.fill, which is we're applying color to the screen. So we don't want to draw the shapes before we apply the screen color. So we want to put the plate down, and then we want to put the sandwich on top of it. So keep in mind to try to draw your objects in a logical order that makes sense. So first we want to color the screen, and then we want to draw once the plate is down, once our screen is colored, then we want to draw the shapes on top of it. So the rectangle is essentially the bun in the analogy that I have there, because we're just going to draw one rectangle today. So now that that's cleared, and then pygame.display.update is just redrawing all the assets. So every time the loop ends, all the assets are redrawn. You can also do pygame.display.flip if you would like. Both do essentially the same thing update just allows for more specific parameters if you would like. But the important thing is that we have our setup here for architecture to allow us to draw our rectangle. So we're going to get started by drawing the creating the actual rectangle. So we're going to create an attribute name. So I'm just going to call it rect1, which is rectangle 1, and then we're going to do pygame dot rect. So what this is doing is it's creating our rectangle inside of Pygame, and there's going to be 4 numbers associated with this. So I'm going to go ahead and draw them out. So these first 2 set the actual location of the rectangle. And these next 2 set the actual size of the rectangle. So 0, 0, if you're familiar with how with a graph, so 0, 0 is going to be the axis, like the XY of where we want to place our rectangle. So on a graph, you have 0, 0, the X and the Y, and that determines the exact location of whatever you're putting on the graph. Whatever you put in place of those X and Y values. So in our case, we're just going to put it at 0, 0 on the graph, and then these 2 are the length and the width of the rectangle. Now, if you do the same number, it creates a square. So whenever you use the rectangle function within Pygame, you can just create a square by doing the same length and width. So that's what these 2 numbers are. So we have X, Y, and then we have length and width. So I'm just going to do 500 and 500 for the size of the rectangle. But just keep in mind to make sure you draw it inside the extent of your screen. So now that we've done that, now we can actually draw the shape. So before I actually draw the shape, I'm going to go ahead and run everything to show you what to walk through the screen for a second. So here's the basic screen. This is where we are drawing our rectangle. However, it's important to note that on a traditional graph, if you're familiar, down here would be on the bottom left. That's where the 0, 0 would traditionally be. If you're looking at a graph, you have 0, 0, and the X goes right, and then the Y goes up if you're looking at a traditional graph. However, how Pygame looks at it is it looks at it from the top left. So the top left is our 0, 0. When we do X, it goes right, just as if it were on the bottom. But the Y goes down. So in Pygame, just keep in mind, as your Y value increases, the actual location will go down on, instead of up. So keep that in mind that Pygame looks at it as 0, 0 is on the top left, as opposed to the tradition, bottom left. So now we are ready. I'm going to go ahead and restart and clear the output of this kernel, and then we're going to run everything again. And now we're going to draw the actual rectangle now that we've created and established exactly where the rectangle is going to go. So to draw, we are going to do pygame.draw.rect, which is the rectangle. And we're not going to capitalize it down here as opposed to up here. So there's a few things in here. First, we're going to put screen because we want the rectangle to be drawn on the screen. And then we're going to establish a color for the rectangle. I'm just going to say green. So we're going to make a green rectangle on top of the white screen. And then we're going to just put rect1 in here. This is the variable we just created. And this goes ahead and throws in all of our values into the rectangle. So this is our shape. This will draw the shape. So the while loop will go through and it'll fill the screen, and then it will draw a shape. It'll update, refresh, and then it'll start over. So I'm going to go ahead and run this, and we're going to look at our rectangle. Boom, there it is. So this is our rectangle. So, keep in mind, I put it at 0, 0, and it shows up on the top left. And then 500, 500, 500 length, 500 width. But I can change that. So I essentially just made a square here, a green square. So that is how you create a rectangle, and you can change its location however you would like. For fun, I'm just going to do like 250, 250 to change it up a little bit. So, and I'm just going to restart and run all. All right, see, and then now it is in the center instead of on the edge. All right, so one more thing before we end the tutorial is we're going to specify, you can create a square, a hollow square with a boundary. And I will explain exactly that in a second. So instead of the traditional square being filled like it was, what you can do is you can specify a boundary for the square. So let's say I want to do like 5 and no, we'll just do 5. So I'll go ahead and show you what that looks like, and then I'll explain it. So go ahead and restart and run all. All right, so boom. So that is very different from the square that I just created. So this square, it is hollow, and um, it has a border. And what I essentially did to create this border is when you put, when you put the two numbers on the end here, what you're doing is you're, removing the hollowness and you're making it, uh, you're just putting essentially a hollow square with the border on there. So that is also an option that you can do as well. When I increase that second number, what the second number does is I should probably explain that a little more clearly. Let me run that again. I'm going to go and make that 10 to help you all understand. So when you don't put the two numbers on the end here, you just create a regular rectangle. But when you put the two numbers on the end, it creates a border rectangle. This first number, what it does is it decides the width of your border on the rectangle. So it's saying, okay, we're saying we don't want, so the rectangle is going to be hollow. And then we decide we're going to put a border on the rectangle, and we decide the actual width of the border. So we're going to say 10. So 10 is the width of the border, and this is the curvature of the rectangle. So if you notice, we have this curve here for the square in this instance, and the higher value we put, the more it curves, and the lower value, the less it curves. So if we want to go crazy here and put like 50, we can, and we can restart and run that. And then we have a significantly increased curve to that. So that's what that determines. And then this, the first number here just determines the actual width of the border on the rectangle. So, and now we have this. So essentially, that is another option you can do if you want to do like a hollow rectangle. You can also, if you want to do like a hollow rectangle with a border, you can, and you can just create like a box like this and you can decide the curvature of the angles right there. If you can just do a regular one too, just by putting this at 0. So let's go ahead and run that. All right, and then boom. So now just a regular rectangle with a border, hollow rectangle with a border with no curvature on the edges. So if you want to do curves, you can set that for a certain number. But if you just no curves, you can set that at 0. And so that's another option you can do with a rectangle. So that is how that's a couple things you can do instead of just a plain rectangle. But that is how you draw a rectangle. So just for review, we create the actual rectangle up here. We have the X and Y location on the screen, and keep in mind for Pygame, the 0, 0 is at the top left, and then we have the length and width of the rectangle. And then down here inside of the game loop, we fill our screen first with the color that we want. And then we draw the actual rectangle that we created up here in our shape module. So here's the rectangle that we've created. We first place it on the screen, then we place the color of the rectangle, and then we throw in the attribute that we made up here for the rectangle. And then if we want, we can make a hollow rectangle with a border. This is the border width, and then this is the curvature of the corners on the rectangle. So that sums up the rectangle within Pygame. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I look forward to you in the next video. Thank you again, and bye.